Happy birthday to one of my favorite people of all time, Chris Cooley, today. Assuming the internet's right. It's not always right, but I'm pretty sure it is on this one. Chris Cooley, 43 years old. He would hate that I am doing this, but he won't even know because A, he doesn't listen, and B, he just doesn't care about sports. So there's no reason that he would be attracted to anything that was said on my show today. And no one will tell him, I'm sure. He just doesn't like any attention brought to himself. Truly one of the least amount of egoed professional successful athletes I have ever been around. I mean, he has zero ego. You know what? Riggins, zero ego. And I was lucky enough to work with both of those gentlemen. By the way, one of the reasons he does not pay attention to sports, and you guys know this over the last couple of years, the number of appearances he's made in doing film breakdown, it's always me kind of asking him or telling him that I need him to do it. That's when he does it, but it's not his thing. His thing is to build things like houses, to hang out with wife and kids, to coach wrestling, which he's doing at one of the powerhouse junior college wrestling programs in the country out in Wyoming. And he loves fishing. And he told me this last week because we caught up last week for a while. He took Travis Kelce out fishing recently. Taylor was not there. Taylor Swift was not with Travis, but Travis was in Wyoming, and he and Cooley know each other, the tight end fraternity. And Cooley took Kelce fishing on one of the many rivers near Cooley's house where he fishes. Anyway, happy birthday to number 47. Good morning, everybody, on this Friday, July 11th. I've got Wimbledon on here in my studio, and I've been watching it. Taylor Fritz and Carlos Alcaraz are going head-to-head in a men's semifinal. I've actually watched a little bit more of Wimbledon this week than I have in a long time, in part because I was a fan of that German woman, Laura Siegemund. We talked about her earlier in the week. She nearly knocked off Sabalenka. Sabalenka ended up losing yesterday to the American in the semifinals. But I realized something about tennis, Wimbledon. And actually, let me amend. It's not something that I realized. It's something that was more confirmed for me. Once again, I used to love tennis, but I don't anymore. And two things kind of confirm that for me, in the last even just 24 hours. One, I made a tee time for morning smack dab in the middle of the men's final. Breakfast at Wimbledon, men's final Sunday morning every year. They play it on Sunday morning. They play the women's final on Saturday morning. There was a time I never missed breakfast at Wimbledon, the men's final. I didn't miss the women's final. It didn't even occur to me that I would be missing it when I committed to golf Sunday morning. And by the way, it doesn't matter to me. I'd much rather go play golf than sit and watch 4 hours of tennis. Tennis for me, much more than I think anything else, is something that I used to love. I used to love to watch it. I actually used to love to play it. And now I just don't care, and I never make time for it. If it's on like it is now, and I'm not doing anything, I am doing something right now, but I, wasn't, yesterday afternoon after the show, I'll watch it. The other thing that kind of confirmed for me that I'm not a big fan of the sport anymore is, an event like Wimbledon was a bucket list item for me. And I actually got to go. I went back in 2007. I've been just once. It was fun. I actually went by myself, which was weird, but we were in Paris on a family vacation. And I just said to my wife, you know what? This is a bucket list item. I am, a 45-minute flight I think I can get tickets. And would you mind if I took a day and just did it? And she didn't care. And I went and did it. I actually stood in the queue in the long line for tickets, got tickets, went center court, went to all of it. It was a very lovely day. Long day, but lovely day. But anyway, I was watching this morning and they're doing the camera pan of all of the celebrities, Cruz and DiCaprio and all of them. And I just thought, who in the hell would want to sit and watch tennis in blazing heat, by the way? It's outrageously hot in London this week, where you might end up having to sit for 4 hours for just one match. That's a long time to sit. There's no other sporting event. I guess if you go to cricket matches, but in our, North American sports, you're not there for 4 hours. College football games, you can be there for 4 hours. But it's also, an active participant sort of, you're up and about, you're loud, you're clapping, you're cheering, you're yucking it up with people. You can't do that. You got to basically sit there and be quiet for 4 hours. That's a long time to sit quietly. There was a time where, I would have loved, and I did. I went to the U.S. Open 6 or 7 times in Flushing Meadow. Great event to go to. I have zero interest to ever go back. And I was sitting there. I'm like, God, man, that is a tough grind to sit there for one match up to 4 hours. If you're going to sit there for both men's semifinals, you might be there for 9 hours for 2 matches. It's not on my list, bucket or otherwise, anymore. So tennis for me is the thing that I used to love that I just don't care about anymore. What sport or sporting event for you is one in which you used to love? It was a can't miss, whether it was live or on television, that you now just don't care about or don't have time for anymore. I think part of that is age. When you get to a certain age, you have, other interests that end up sort of trumping the ancillary interests. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. What sport or sporting event was a can't miss for you, and now you couldn't care less about it, or you don't have time for it anymore, and it is just fallen way down the list? 301-230-0980. I was just thinking about that, and I was like, man, I used to be so into this. And I think I've thought about that, every year for the last several years. And, I do have friends that didn't used to be into tennis that are now into tennis. You know why? Because they bet tennis and they live bet tennis all the time. Apparently for some, it's an opportunity. I always say, be careful about betting opportunities. Today's opportunity is tomorrow's, looking for some help to pay off the man. 301-230-0980. What sport or sporting event did you used to absolutely love? It was can't miss, and now you don't care that much for anymore. By the way, for me, like the majors in tennis in particular were must watch. Not just when it got down to the Final Four, the semis and the finals. I would sit there for the U.S. Open especially. The U.S. Open is, a time frame that syncs up with the beginning of football season too. But on those weeknights at the end of the summer or that first week in September, when you would have matches that would go sometimes into the early morning hours, I can remember watching, Todd Martin and Andre Agassi play until about 2 a.m. There were some of those matches, Connors and Patrick McEnroe in that famous 1990 Connors run to the semifinals. The first run, he's down 2-0 to Patrick McEnroe. The match didn't end until like 2:50 a.m. I used to sit there and watch all of it. I thought it was incredibly dramatic. Pete Sampras throwing up in flower beds on the sides. Tennis is a grueling sport. It is... there's no help. It's just you. And it's you sometimes for 4 or 5 hours. I used to love that. The U.S. Open in particular. I still think the U.S. Open is kind of a very dramatic event. It can be, but nowhere near as important. I don't watch any of that stuff in the early rounds unless there's something dramatic. Like Serena in recent years, before she retired, I was watching some of those matches thinking they might be her final matches. I do like watching Coco Gauff when she plays. This new kid on the men's side, Ben Shelton, I might watch him, but there's no appointment watching here. The Australian Open, remember, it's still the case because they haven't changed time zones, where basically you wake up and they're like in the fifth set of a massive match, and it was great. I don't even turn it on. I forget that it's on in January, leading into the championship games and eventually the Super Bowl week. I think that's when it typically gets played. And it's like a Tuesday morning, and if you wake up and you turn on the TV at 5:15 in the morning, you wake up, it's like tennis is going on, live tennis from Melbourne. The days of Wimbledon on HBO, didn't miss it. Couldn't care less now. Max, you're much younger, so maybe you haven't gotten to the point where you are over something, but is there an event or a sport that you have tired of?
I wouldn't say tired of it. It's more falls into the line of the question where, just not having the time to keep up with it as much anymore as I used to. Baseball is kind of I hate to say it because, I work at the flagship basically, but at the same time, 162 games in like 185 days is so much to keep up with, and it's so much time to invest. So that's one that I kind of have fallen off with ever since I was a kid. Because when I was a youth, I loved the Nats, and I still do. But like at the same time, I had a connection because there's Bryce Harper, Anthony Rendon, like they were all coming up kind of when I was growing up. So it was a big thing for me. And since the World Series, I've kind of just checked out almost. I've been keeping up casually, but not as nearly as hardcore as I used to. Another one, this is only every 4 years, but I used to, when I was a little kid, get really juiced up for the World Cup because I don't know, I'm not a huge like club soccer guy, but in terms of international soccer, I for whatever reason, I'm drawn to it. So that was one that when I was really little, I used to get like all amped up for. Team USA, I felt they had a fighting chance back when I was younger. Now I see that that's not as a realistic expectation as it used to be, but the World Cup and baseball are kind of two that I've fallen off on a little bit. Yeah.
Baseball for me, when I was much younger, I loved baseball. The regular season, not so much, but I would pay attention a lot more than I do now. And remember, for 34 years, we didn't have baseball or a baseball team to follow. And unlike many of my friends, I did not adopt the Orioles. I wanted my own team in Washington. But baseball, it wouldn't be in that category for me. For me, the other one would probably be the NBA regular season. I used to watch a lot of NBA during the regular season. It's been years since I've really watched a lot of NBA during the regular season. So this is not a new, phenomena for me. But the NBA regular season became unwatchable for me, probably 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And I used to love it. And I wouldn't miss a Wizards game. And up until recently, I would still watch most Wizards regular season games. But the one that really and truly for me was a can't miss, and now it is an absolute can miss, and I don't even think about missing it, is tennis. And the four majors were always the big draw. For me, Wimbledon, the U.S. Open, the French was a distant third behind, those two. And then the Australian was just interesting because of the time that you could get up and watch it. But what is it for you? 301-230-0980. What sport or sporting event did you used to love? It was can't miss, but now you just don't care about it or don't have time for it anymore. 301-230-0980. We've got some football on the show today for sure and a lot more, but we'll start with this. Want to hear what you say. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. From Paul on Twitter. So Cooley's birthday is today, and your buddy Scott's birthday was yesterday. Actually, it wasn't, but I'm looking on the internet here, and people were saying happy birthday to Scott yesterday. So the internet isn't always right, because I know yesterday was not his birthday. Weird. The internet's not always right, you know. You know where the internet's almost always wrong is when you put in like you're interested in somebody, you know, some athlete or some celebrity's net worth. Apparently, those things are so far off from being true that I've had many people in that realm that get searched for that say, not even close, but I wish it were true. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. I turned on the TV this morning. Wimbledon was on. I realized I had made a tee time, a golf commitment Sunday morning during the men's final. And I realized, not for the first time, but just sort of confirmed, man, this used to be can't miss for me. This used to be a sport and an event that I loved that I just don't care that much about anymore. If it's on and I have time, I'll watch it. That match the other day that we were talking about when the show started, I was into that because of the story of the German woman, Laura Siegemund, being 37 years old, playing, you know, sort of a crafty, you know, awkward, odd sort of style that annoys players. I kind of liked that. But other than that, man, I just don't care anymore. Used to love it. Was can't miss. U.S. Open staying up until 1:32 a.m. watching, you know, these men's singles matches go 5 sets, go to a tiebreaker in the fifth. It was dramatic. It was. And tennis can be dramatic, you know, at the end after 5, you know, plus hours. It is a grueling sport, but just don't have the passion for it at all anymore. So I'm asking all of you, what sport or sporting event did you used to love? It was an absolute must-watch, can't miss, that now you don't care about or don't have time for anymore. 301-230-0980. Let's start with Scott in Odenton. Scott, go ahead.
Good morning, Kevin. How you doing?
I'm well, Scott.
Good. Well, I heard what you said earlier about, you know, regular season basketball, that sort of thing. I'm the same with that. I used to watch all the, you know, good players in the 90s, including Jordan, Karl Malone, Olajuwon, that sort of thing. I keep track a little bit, but I don't watch the games. But the real reason I'm calling is, like your colleague, I used to love baseball as a kid. I used to watch every single Orioles game on home team sports. I used to watch the Braves games on TBS. I used to like watching Nolan Ryan and all the Braves players and even the Marlins when they were good those couple of years back then. But once Ripken retired and Gwynn retired and a couple other guys, I just lost interest. And I thought that was going to happen with tennis too for me. I'm a huge tennis fan still, but when all those Americans from the 70s, 80s, 90s, especially Sampras, Agassi, Courier. Once these guys were retiring, I thought I was going to stop watching. But luckily, we had Federer and Djokovic and Nadal come through, and that kept me engaged with the sport. A real quick question for you: when did you stop watching tennis regularly? And the Federer and Djokovic and them just not spark your interest?
Yeah, it's a great question because when you said, I think for me, Agassi was the last guy that I was truly invested in, because remember, it was a resurrection of his career, right? He'd gone away, he'd fallen basically out of the rankings. He was playing, that circuit to try to get back onto the main tour briefly. And then he came back and, he won Wimbledon and, I forget what year that was. I want to say it was 99 Wimbledon. When did he win
92.
Wimbledon? 92. Well, okay. So when he came back in sort of the mid to late 90s after his fall, was it the French that he ended up winning to give him the career Grand Slam?
Yes. So that's what he resurrected his career, and
Exactly.
then he was basically good. Up until really the last year he played when he started having injuries.
The back injury, yeah.
Yeah, let me ask you a quick question. I know you're the host. I'm sorry. I'm just curious.
No, please.
You're more of an Agassi fan than I was.
I was a big Agassi guy.
I was more of a Sampras fan. But
yeah.
Do you think that if Agassi had the mentality that Sampras had throughout his career, do you think guys would still be chasing Agassi? Like Agassi would have 20 or more slams? Because I think that's what would have happened.
I don't know about 20 or more. By the way, I just pulled it up. So when he really made that comeback, he won the 99 French, right? To, win the career Grand Slam. And then he ended up winning 3 of the next 4 majors. He won the U.S. Open that year. He won the Australian Open in 2000. He won the Australian in 2001. But remember, there were some epic Agassi-Sampras matches. There was that quarterfinal that year at the U.S. Open that was one of like the highest rated tennis matches ever. That may have been 2000. Who did Hewitt beat right before 9/11? Was that?
It was both matches are 2001. Sampras beat Agassi in the quarters
in that
2001 U.S. Open, and then Sampras lost to Hewitt. Basically, it was Sampras won a semi in 2001 in the U.S. Open against Hewitt, got tired, lost to Marat Safin, if you remember him. And then it was swapped the next year where Sampras beat Safin in 2001 semi, and then he lost to Hewitt. And then Sampras all of a sudden the next year didn't do much till he beat that U.S. Open, beat Agassi in the final, and then retired. But what I was going to say is Federer and them, just watching those guys, they didn't keep your interest.
It's a really interesting question, and I thank you for the call. And it's a good call, and it's conjuring up memories. There's no doubt that it started to wane for me after the Agassi-Sampras career. That era. Now, early in Rogers, run, I was a big Roger fan. I loved Fed. I loved him more than Nadal, and I liked both of them more than I've ever really liked Djokovic. I liked Murray, but I would say that, probably starting in like the 2010s is when I really sort of started to check out, and it wasn't nearly the same. I guess I could say the easy answer would be, well, there were no Americans involved, but I don't think that was it, because there were foreign players that I loved. I was a big Becker guy. I loved Wielander. I loved Edberg, going back, to the day. I liked Pat Cash. I loved Pat Cash's game. But I think it was more like a lot of people where tennis started to fall off. Golf was emerging. Tiger's, emergence made golf immediately more popular than tennis. And then the other part of it was there weren't big personalities. Fed was not a huge personality. Agassi, major personality. Becker, the big Dutchman, Krejcik. I used to love watching him play. Big serve and volleyer. He won Wimbledon one year. Cash won it. He won it. Cash won at Wimbledon, right? I think Cash won.
I think 87.
87. Yeah. Like those big serve and volleyers, especially as the serve and volleyers started to fade. Remember Patrick Rafter, Australian. He won a couple of majors as a serve and volleyer. Anyway, yeah, I would say it was the 2010s. Thanks, Scott, for the call. Really appreciate it. The question we're asking is, what sport or sporting event did you used to absolutely love that you just don't care about anymore? For me, it's tennis and the tennis majors. I'll watch it if it's on, like it is right now, where, I'd love Taylor Fritz to beat Alcaraz. He's down a break in the third in a men's semifinal. They're 1-1 in sets in the third set. But, I mean, it's not like I'm going to sit here if it's got another hour and a half or 2 hours to go and stick it through. Let's go to our guy, Robert, in Annapolis. Robert, go ahead.
Well, same as you, tennis and the NBA, not basketball, but the NBA. But the other one, boxing. The heavyweights.
Oh
in the
my
70s,
God! Yes. How did I not
that,
mention that? Same. I was a massive boxing fan.
Right. The heavyweights in the 70s, but the lighter weights in the 80s. My God, Leonard, Hearns, Hagler, Duran, Alguero, Aaron Pryor,
Alexis Arguello, and Aaron Pryor. Those fights were incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, I think half those guys wound up with brain damage, but they could put on a good fight. And the other thing is the Olympics, both the Winter and the Summer Olympics. I used to watch both of them when they would occur, and I don't have any interest anymore. And you're right, part of it is age, and part of it, the other thing with tennis, but they took away all the tennis courts. I played tennis all the time in the 70s, and the places I used to play, there's no tennis courts there anymore. But anyhow, those are mine. All right.
You nailed it with boxing. I was a huge fight fan. I've talked about this before, but my father was a huge fight fan. He took me to like closed circuit, fights in the 70s to watch them. Not all the time. Sometimes it was with his friends, but my father was, Ali, Namath, ABA, AFL, even though we had, Redskins season tickets, and was a massive boxing fan. And I became one too in the 80s, really, forget about the emergence of Tyson. It was all about Roberto Duran, Sugar Ray Leonard, Tommy the Hitman Hearns, Arguello, Pryor, etc. That was Hagler, obviously. I mean, I still, every time it pops up on social media, Hagler Hearns is maybe the most incredible and intense. It would be 9 minutes in total of sporting action of all time. If you've never seen Hagler and Hearns, 3 rounds, 3 minutes around, 9 minutes from 1985. Al Michaels was on one call. There are multiple calls of it, but it is the most intense, short boxing match ever. Boxing was great. That's a really good one. I can't believe that I forgot to mention that. The other thing too, I'll just mention, what doesn't interest me as much anymore, and it's part because of the nature of the sport too, but conference championship weekend during college basketball in March, it's just not a big deal at all. Now, for me, it's personal. The ACC tournament was a big part of my fan DNA. I mean, the ACC tournament was a fixture on the sports calendar for any Maryland fan, any ACC fan. And it was tradition. Literally, like you could not miss and didn't miss any of the games from quarterfinal round on. But man, the Big Ten tournament, other than watching Maryland and the games they play, and the ACC and the Big East tournament, doesn't do anything for me. I still love the NCAA tournament, even though, you're almost being introduced to many of the teams and many of the players in that moment because it's become such an irrelevant regular season sport. But conference championship weekend used to be must watch for me, isn't anymore. Let's go to Anthony in DC. Anthony, go ahead.
So, Kevin, like yourself, even though he was a black hole, I was a Big E fan. And I used to go to the Cap Center when they used to give out those rubber basketballs. Yeah, Elvin Hayes. That was my man.
Yeah.
So fast forward to the 90s, I think I fell off with the Wizards about the end of the John Wall era. And on a macro level, I think, on a macro level, I don't really care for college football and college basketball anymore. And it's simply because of the player movement. Back in the day, you knew who played for who, and you knew they weren't going anywhere. Now, once I got back from the military in the early 90s, I started losing track of who was playing for who, and then it just accelerated with gasoline in the 2000s.
Yeah,
I have no idea. I have no idea who 90% of the players in college football and basketball are anymore. So right. that's why I've lost interest in that.
I get that. It's interesting, Anthony. I actually was in a text back and forth with a friend of mine who played professional football, now is in business, but still follows everything. And we were talking. He asked me, he said, have you done anything recently on, college sports and the salary cap? We had Andrew Brand on earlier this week or last week, I forget, talking about some of this stuff, and we talk about it all the time. But anyway, long story short, I said what I've said on this show before to him. I said, as much as I thought player movement, unrestricted annual free agency because of NIL and the portal, and now we'll get the salary cap. When the games come on, it doesn't impact me at all. I love college football. I actually prefer Saturdays to Sundays and have for much of my life. College football, look, they're 1 and 1A. It depends on the weekend. It depends on the matchups. It depends on how good my team, is in terms of Washington. But it's funny because I thought that would impact the way that it might impact negatively the way I felt about college football. It hasn't. When the games come on, even though the players are in different places and you got to figure it out as you go. Oh, that guy's at Tennessee. He's not at Oregon anymore. Oh, that guy's, at Michigan. He's not at LSU anymore. For whatever reason, I still love college football. I love the games. In college basketball, this, past year, a lot of it is driven by Maryland for me, because that is, a number 1A love along with the Skins. Right. But the tournament is still an incredible watch, even though going in, sometimes you're like, oh man, that guy played for Louisville last year. That guy played for Wisconsin. Now he plays for Louisville. But I don't know. The games are still great. So I get where you're coming from. And a lot of people feel that way. I actually was more impacted negatively on college sports by all of the conference reshuffling. I hate that. I wish we could put it back to, Maryland in the ACC, West Virginia in the Big East, and have all the, traditional rivalries back where they are. But, like our old name here for the football team, that horse left the barn a while ago. Thanks, Anthony.
I'll watch in passing college football and college basketball. But remember back in the day, you knew who a Jason Watts was. You knew who a David Overstreet was. Now it's just flip a coin.
Oklahoma wishbone, players for 200. Alex, thanks, Anthony. I got to get to a break. If you're on hold, stay there. Jeff, Adam, Matt, Ian. We've got a line open. What sport or sporting event did you used to love that you don't care about anymore? For me, number one on the list is tennis and the majors. Wimbledon's going on right now. I got it on. I'm watching. I'm rooting for Taylor Fritz, the American, but I really don't have much passion for it. What about you? 301-230-0980. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980, theteam980.com. We're also free and live on the Odyssey app. Don't forget, you can stream the show and watch it live on the Team 980 YouTube channel. When you get there, subscribe and hit the like button.
All right, here's what's happening on this Friday, July 11th. Happy 7-11 to all. It is free Slurpee Day. And now some sports. Wimbledon action going on right now. Men's semifinal. Taylor Fritz is taking on Carlos Alcaraz. Alcaraz currently leads 2-1. Later today, they will take on the winner of Jannik Sinner, going up against legendary Serb Novak Djokovic. And the home run derby participants have been finalized. Ronald Acuna, Byron Buxton, Junior Caminero, O'Neal Cruz, Cal Raleigh, Brent Rooker, DC's James Wood, and last night it was rounded out by New York Yankees Jazz Chisholm. And the Mystics, they get their win last night over the Las Vegas Aces after erasing a 15-point deficit and battling down the stretch. They win 70-68. Wizards Summer League debuts tonight at 9 p.m. They will take on the Phoenix Suns. And the Nats, they wrap up their series in St. Louis. They fall to the Cardinals by a score of 8-1. A rough outing for Michael Soroka as he threw 91 pitches through just 4 innings. The Nats kick off their series against the Brewers tonight. First pitch is at 8:10. Nats on deck with Charlie and Dave at 7:40 on the Fan. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1 and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the streams and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
What's the sporting event you used to love that you just don't care about anymore? For me, it's tennis. Although I have to say, Robert reminding me, I was massively into boxing. Just loved boxing. Couldn't care less about boxing anymore. But tennis for me was top of mind because this morning, and this would have never happened 10, 12 years ago. Probably not even 5 or 6 years ago, maybe. I just made a tea time. Somebody asked, you available? You want to be our fourth Sunday morning? Sure. Didn't even think about what I used to be an absolute present, accounted for sporting event for me was Wimbledon men's final Sunday morning, breakfast at. Don't care anymore. What about it? What about for you? What's the sport or sporting event you used to love that you just don't care as much about anymore, or you don't have time for anymore? Let's go to Jeff in Vienna. Jeff, go ahead.
Happy Friday, Kevin.
You too, Jeff.
And Hagler Hearns and Connors Crickstein. That brings back some memories.
Connors Crickstein. Labor Day, 1990.
Yeah.
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 Do you know that match?
Was insane.
Jeff, do you know that match that Connors and Crickstein were practice partners? And then after that match, they had a major falling out, and Connors just sort of abandoned Crickstein. There's a whole documentary or, something that's been done about that. And then they finally reconciled many, many years later. Connors was a difficult guy, obviously, but they were practice partners, and Crickstein considered Jimmy, even though he was older, to be a friend. And after that match, and Crickstein melted down in that match and blew it, Connors didn't talk to him for years. So it was an odd thing. But anyway, go ahead.
Didn't know that. Connors with that steel frame Wilson 2000 or whatever.
T2000, yep.
So, yeah, I'm glad you briefly mentioned Wimbledon. Right now I'm laying out a trip next year that might include Wimbledon, the British F1 race, Scottish or the British Open, and maybe the Tour de France. Trying to lay that all out. So Wimbledon would be great. For me, it's the MLB All-Star Game and the Home Run Derby.
That's a good one.
Monday night and Tuesday. I've been to 4 or 5 All-Star games. I was at Camden Yards in '93 when MJ was in the celebrity home run hitting contest. I saw Harper win the one at Nats Park. But when Max just read off those names of the guys in the home run derby, I'm like, yeah, I probably won't even know that it's on Monday, And same for Tuesday with the All-Star game, although they are finally going back to wearing their own uniforms this year, which will be a huge help.
That's another one. Although I was, because Gore and Wood are in the game this year, and when that was announced the other day, I was like, I'm going to watch the All-Star game. I mean, I want to see how they do. But you're right. But I would say for me, even more so, the NBA All-Star game, that used to be must watch. That is now a joke, even though they are going to go to the international stars against the American-born stars in 2026. Although if they don't play hard and they treat it like it's, an exhibition of, half-court shots and trick shots, it's still not going to work. They've got to compete in that game for it to work. Jeff, thanks. Appreciate it. Let's go to Adam.
Yeah, hit him straight.
Adam's calling from Ruckersville. Adam, what's the sporting event or sport you used to love that you just don't care about anymore?
Yeah, so when I first was out of college, some buddies of mine would always get together right at the NFL draft before they switched the format to being Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And it was all on Saturday. The first couple rounds were on Saturday. They had some others on Sunday, I think. Anyway, that Saturday would always be get a bushel of crabs, roll out the keg, get some cornhole, spend the whole day talking, football and just watching the draft. And when they switched the format, I still watch it, but it just doesn't have the same fanfare that, the opportunity of it all being on Saturday, presented. So that's something that I always look back on.
Well, it's interesting. In college, the draft was literally on ESPN, but it was a weekday morning, and it would start at 8 a.m. and it would go the entire day. I mean, it was a whole day event, and it was Kuiper, and it was Berman and whoever else was on. And I can tell you that my friends and I in college, we had the quarter to half keg fired up and ready to go at like 7 a.m. for the NFL draft. And that was a fun day for sure. I do remember that, Adam. Thanks. Matt, go ahead.
Thanks, Kevin. Can you hear me?
I got you, Matt.
Great. Looking back to the World Series, Oakland A's of 73, Reds of 74, Yankees of 77. Those were great teams, and there are only 3 networks to choose from. So it was a different time then. And now it's people have more to choose from. People have more channels.
Sure.
People have cable. And look at the Florida Marlins now. They have a lot of in their own community. They have a hard time getting viewers, I think, because the Marlins have a lot to compete with. But back in the 70s, we all had a national outlook, I think. I don't know how many people watched Kurt Gowdy, but it was a different time then.
Well, I mean, you're talking about legendary times, but yeah, I mean, of course, everything's changed because of so much fragmentation when it comes to, viewing options. And back then it was, NBC, ABC, and CBS, and that was it for sports. And look, when you think about that period, the World Series went head to head with the NFL. It would be right there on a Sunday afternoon, the World Series in October, going head to head with the NFL. NBC would, show the World Series games, and CBS was showing an NFL game, and baseball didn't care. I mean, I remember, the baseball, up until probably the 80s, baseball wouldn't fear going head to head with the NFL. Like Sunday night football, certainly when you get to the 90s, Monday night football. But man, over the last quarter century plus, they try to steer clear of any NFL conflict. And you can't help it in the early rounds of the postseason, but they try to steer clear of all of it. Let's finish it up with Dennis. Dennis, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin, good talking to you again. I know this sounds weird after what y'all are talking about, but me and my son used to love WWF wrestling. And I mean, going back to the 70s for me, still one of the loudest events I've ever been to, and I've been to hundreds, was when Bruno Sammartino fought at Capitol Center against his protege who turned against him. It was extraordinary to hear that. And we have been to many other ones. We saw George the Animal Steel, Andre the Giant, Axe and Smash, all those great acts. And I know that may not count as a sport, but boy,
no, but you're about to tell me you don't care anymore.
I do not. It doesn't do it anymore. It's all stories lines all the time. There's almost no wrestling when you go to the TV shows, and I don't even know any of them anymore.
Yeah, I do remember a period of time where I would watch, the WWE on Channel 20 on a Saturday morning, but it just was never for me. I just never really embraced it because it was not really sport. It wasn't true competition. But I have friends of mine that I'm always surprised at just how into it they were. I mean, Tommy was so into it. Al Galdi, a good friend of mine for, 20 years now, just is still, references all those, guys whenever he can. So, I just never got it. Never really got into it. But maybe the next
big deal. But
maybe the next topic, a few years from now will be what didn't you ever care about that now you actually like? Thanks, Dennis. Appreciate it. Appreciate the call. Appreciate all the calls. Yeah, for me, God, man, a couple of them came up. The NBA All-Star Game, that used to be must-watch. It hasn't been must-watch for a long time for me.
The dunk contest, if I'm going to jump in,
never missed NBA All-Star Saturday night 10, 15 years ago. Not for me. For my kids, not for me. And the game itself, we talked about it, after the game this year. It's an absolute joke. And the players themselves are responsible for ruining it. They don't have, enough understanding or self-awareness that they are taking something that used to be very popular and running it into the ground. They just don't have time for it. They're too wealthy, they're too busy, they just don't give two craps about it. And I'm going to be very interested to see come February of 2026, the international lineup against the American lineup. A lot of people think that this is going to be the solution to the NBA game. It could be, but not if they play the game like they've been playing the game. They're hoping that international versus American generates what that, the four nations thing generated. I don't know. I think basketball players are different than hockey players. And I question whether or not you're going to see real competition versus exhibition. We'll see when we get there. Mike Florio, remember we talked about what he wrote yesterday on ProFootballTalk.com, that the new uniforms, or the alt uniforms in 25, but will eventually become the permanents, we believe, in 26 or no later than 27. He thought it was the first step towards reclaiming the old name. He was on with the Junkies this morning and added some context and some detail to what he wrote yesterday. You'll hear some of that next. So yesterday we talked about Mike Florio writing that the alt uniforms going back to the Super Bowl era uniforms, the championship uniforms, was essentially going to be the first step towards bringing the old name back. I suggested yesterday that a guy like Florio, first of all, over the years, wasn't a Redskins fan, wasn't a fan of the name, very much part of that group that was trying to get the team to get rid of the name and bury it for good. He couldn't stand Dan Snyder. Nobody could in media. A lot of different things over the years that were just dead ass wrong. I mean, the whole idea that Washington was all in on Lamar Jackson in the summer or the offseason of 2023 was just so absurd. Dan wasn't going to lay out a nickel in the process of selling the team, let alone, $100+ million with a lot of it in escrow before he sold the team. That was obvious to anybody that was following it. But, I kind of feel like what we were getting from Florio was, this attempt, and you'll get some of this, the throwback uniforms, going back to the uniforms, even though all of us have kind of known that it was coming for a while, especially if you listen to this show, that, it was going to conjure up memories of the Redskins. And, I saw an editorial or, an opinion piece in the Washington Times from somebody who heads an Indian reservation saying it's time to bring the name back. And you're going to get a lot of that. You're going to get a lot of the people that think, oh, Trump can make this happen. I hope it happens. I hope anybody that can make it happen gets involved and makes it happen. I just don't think it will. In fact, I bet a lot of money that it won't. Not in my lifetime, or certainly not in any kind of foreseeable future. I don't think it's ever coming back. As I've said many times, the problem is not whether or not the team and the team's limited partners and managing partner Josh Harris want the old name back. It's the league. It's the $26 billion worth of NFL partners and how they have felt for many, many, many years about the name. They didn't do anything about it until FedEx did something about it, and then everybody kind of jumped on board, but they had to deal with it. The league had to deal with it. The networks had to deal with it. And it was just an annoyance, and many of those people believed that it was wrong, and didn't care to kind of jump into the actual debate and the substance and the facts about the name and who supported it and who didn't and what Native Americans thought, etc. They're just not going back to that. They're not going to risk these long-standing and very, very significant revenue-generating relationships. And, the league doesn't want to have to deal with it. They had to deal with it all the time. And sure, it was, up and down. Some years it was a very hot topic. In other years, it would die down. 2016, that poll in the Post really silenced it for a while. If it were still here, there wouldn't be any threat of it going away. Not in 2025, but it's not here. And the, pushback from $26 billion worth of league partners to it coming back is going to prevent it from ever coming back, even if current ownership would like to do it. Because trust me, they understand that the number one needle mover, and by the way, by extension, the number one revenue generator, revenue increaser, would be to go back to the old name and damn all the people on the outside that would, have an issue with it. They just don't have that ability to do it. They're not, able to make unilateral decisions. There are league bylaws. They're one of 32. All of that stuff has to be cleared through the league. All of the branding stuff does. But a lot of attention off of the Florio column yesterday and a lot of belief that, maybe, he knows something, or maybe this move to the old uniforms is something. No, I think personally it's just, this is what we can do, and we want to do this, and we want to tie back into our past. But Florio was on with the Junkies this morning, and there were a couple of sound bites that I wanted you to hear. This first one, you can just play it because he's basically essentially trying to get out ahead of things where he sees them going. Here's what he said.
What's the quote that Michael Scott used that was from Wayne Gretzky? No, that wasn't that quote. His quote, that was the you miss every shot you take or some crap like that. The other Gretzky quote is, you don't skate to where the puck is, you skate to where the puck's going to go.
All right.
And ever since Josh Harris bought the team, remember when he bought the team, he used the old name like 3 times the first day. And Magic Johnson tweeted it. And there was a flurry of reporting and questions posed to the team. Hey, are you setting up a return of the old name? No, harumph, no. And then Dan Quinn shows up at that press conference last May with the non-licensed shirt that had the 2 feathers on it. And no. And when you look at what's going on and you broaden the lens, they're trying to get that stadium built. They're trying to get DC Council to move forward. There has been reporting, and I think Phil Mendelson, the DC Council chair, has said he's heard talk that they may run to the president and get the president to help break this logjam so they can get the thing open in time to try to host the Women's World Cup and the Rugby World Cup, yada, yada. And you got the president saying, I never would have changed the name. And then these uniforms land, which look exactly like the old uniforms. And almost every image I saw of the new uniform has the helmet positioned at an angle where you can't see the logo on the side. And it looks like you're looking at 1985 Washington football. And then that video, and I missed the video when it came out, but when I saw that video early yesterday morning as I was doom scrolling, I couldn't believe my eyes, because for a team that has completely shied away from any imagery that uses the old logo, they were all in. They were cannonball in the deep end of the pool. And I just think it's part of this dance of, inching maybe, oh, no, we have no plans. We're not considering it. Ooh, look at this. Hey, look at that. Oh, well, hey, if the president wants it and he's going to help us get this stadium built, well, we got no – I just feel like it's something to watch. And I saw that someone was like, oh, I'm trying to muster up opposition. I don't care. Whatever they do, they do. I don't care about that. But I think it's a fascinating story to monitor because it feels like something's going on.
That's interesting what he just said there at the end. And this is the first time I heard it too, that he doesn't care what they do. He cared very deeply for a long period of time that name not be used anymore, that it was, deeply, deeply offensive and racist. And they need to get rid of it. And he was a big advocate of them getting rid of it. So that's an interesting take at the end. I don't necessarily buy it, but the Michael Scott line is, it was, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And he said, that's what Wayne Gretzky said. But anyway, I don't see Trump even being necessary to getting the city council to vote yes on RFK. I think we're going to get that. I think we're going to get that at some point next month. I certainly hope we get it next month. I hope it doesn't go into September. But I just think that this is more trying to conjure up, something that a lot of the people that have thought for a while, they finally got rid of it. It's gone. Oh, the Commanders, now it's an organization that is legitimate, the whole thing. He's trying to rile some of those people up, even though he said he was not. I don't know. Other than that, I don't have a lot of reaction to that particular soundbite. It's a nice angle to take, but they've been working on this uniform thing and the logo thing for a while. Like the logo, by the way, has been in social media, and the league's gone back to not, caring about the name or the logo. The logo's never been an issue, as we all know. We've lived this issue very intimately and closely, we know the logo's never been offensive. It's never been controversial. So the logo, I do think, is a possibility in the next year or two. How it comes back, in what form, I'm not sure. I would prefer it to be on the helmets at the very least. And I'd prefer a move back to a Washington football team, knowing that Redskins can't happen, even though that would be the ultimate. There's one more soundbite we're going to play, right, Max? It's which one is this?
So this is him kind of saying it's Josh Harris is not Dan Snyder. He kind of argues that the name change was more about Snyder than anything, and he said it'd be foolish to think that the team isn't really monitoring the situation. So here's what Mike Florio said.
Right. But here's the problem, I think, when you look at it from a practical standpoint, and I wish they had never changed it. I wish it just stayed Redskins. I think it's ridiculous, but whatever. The market spoke. They changed it. They pulled the money. Even if the political winds changed and they got some sort, maybe the scenario you said played out and the president got involved and pressured him and that got him a stadium. If they change, what's going to prevent them 3 or 4 years from now when the political winds change again and then a big, a big advertiser steps up and says, yeah, we're pulling the money. It just makes them too vulnerable. I don't think they want to open themselves up to that.
Well, that's part of the question they're going to have to ask themselves, and what they need to consider if they would ultimately do this is, if you go back to the old name, you just have to tell the world, we don't care what you think. And you can write about it all you want. You can do polls all you want. You can write opinion pieces all you want. You can protest all you want. This is the name of the team.
They do that until they pull the money, Mike. When they pull the money, based on political wins.
Unless the world's different.
Yeah, when they pull the money, then it all goes away.
But there's one very big difference. Josh Harris is not Dan Snyder. And I think that the stew of factors that led to the decision in July of 2020 to change the name, that was as much, if not more, about Snyder and about the late Fred Smith trying to extricate himself from partnership with Snyder.
I agree.
Because it was the FedEx pressure that really got that ball rolling. And I think it was Ron Rivera as well who was pushing and pushing and pushing. But that's all part of this. I'm not saying they're going to do it. I'm just saying there's enough of a flirtation with it that it would be foolish to think a multi-billion-dollar organization isn't at some level monitoring the reaction and factoring it in to future decisions. And, maybe they just bring back the logo and not the name. Maybe they bring back the logo for a certain period of time, and let's see how permanent the current political change in the winds will last. And maybe at some point the name does come back, or maybe it just comes back on the legacy weekends. I don't know. I just think that, I know the idea that the door is slammed shut on the old name, which is kind of what I thought they were doing, that's done. Because when those uniforms landed this week, they did everything but bring back the old name and the old logo. So, and they kind of know what they're doing. They kind of have that, that glint in the eye as they do it. They know, and the fans know.
God, I wish he were right about that last point, but I don't agree with him at all on that last point. I wish, though, so much, as he was saying it, I wish that it were true. But they have talked about bringing back, and tying back to the past, with at the same time being very adamant that the old name's not coming back. He said something that, this was more about Snyder than anything else. The actual loss of the name was about Dan. It was about the way Dan treated his minority shareholders, one specifically Fred Smith, the founder and the chairman of Federal Express, not only a massive Washington partner, but a massive NFL partner. That's true. What isn't true is that the name for years upon years was protested because of Dan. That's not true. It was protested because of what the name is defined by in dictionaries, and how that created, a massive group of people who became offended or became, conveniently in the business of being offended. That had nothing to do with Dan. The name was being protested long before Dan, but the actual loss of it, he's right. Dan's lack of, human, treatment of even his minority shareholders, decency, got to the point where everybody hated him. And when they stopped getting updates and they stopped getting dividends and they started to not trust him, they went after him. Dwight Schrute went after him by working with that Indian-based media internet company to create that incredible series of internet fabrications about him being tied to Epstein and drug trafficking and drug parties and sex parties and the whole thing. And Fred Smith went for the jugular. He went for the name. And Fred Smith couldn't have cared less about the name for the first 20 years of being an owner. In fact, he wanted to take a majority of the team at various points and wouldn't have changed the name on his own. But Dan brought it all on himself. The change, the pulling of the name in the summer of 2020, the root cause of that, and when Fred Smith passed away, remember, a few weeks ago, we talked about this. He actually went for the jugular and buried it, but it was because of Dan's treatment of Fred Smith and Federal Express and his minority shareholders. But the name was not protested for all of those years because of a dislike for Dan, and they'll treat it better because Josh Harris owns the team. No. If the name comes back, all of those people will resurface, and maybe it'll be quieter during periods like now, and it'll be much louder during periods which are more progressively dominated. And yeah, the team can tell everybody to shut up and sit down like they did for many years, but they'd be more effective. Dan would have been more effective if he had been less antagonistic and been more proactive, working with all of those Indian reservations, getting them on board in a major way, helping, repair and fund and resuscitate some of those places that are so downtrodden with drugs and alcohol and so many other issues. Dan would have been much better off treating, the people that could impact something like this much better, like Fred Smith. But he was not very strategic ever. He was super impulsive, and then became a bit desperate as the fans started to leave and revenues, other than media revenues, started to drop. Anyway, it's going to be an interesting thing to follow. Right now, what we do know is that ownership may be a little bit late, maybe not fully complete, because we'd like the logo and some of you would like a feather hanging off the W or whatever. But they gave us something that we believe is going to be permanent, that will at least not completely connect many back to many that have been out back to the team, but at least when they use and wear those threads in 3 games this year and hopefully 17 the year after, it's going to feel like we're watching the old team. All right. When we come back, speaking of kind of teams and revenues, sports empires, not teams, but owners and groups who own multiple teams are now referred to as sports empires. Mike Ozanian from CNBC wrote about that and created a top 20 list, and 2 of those empires are run by 2 of our owners in town. You'll hear my conversation with him next. right now is Mike Ozanian. Mike is a sports business reporter for CNBC. We had Mike on the show multiple times during the sale process of our football team during that year and a half. And he was always incredibly helpful and interesting. And I read what Mike put together with CNBC this morning, ranking sports empires, the top 20 in the world for the year 2025. And I thought this was an interesting topic for a number of reasons. And Mike joins us right now. First of all, before we get to some of these individual, empires, two of which, by the way, are run by two local sports owners here in DC. This is, right, not a list about the wealthiest of owners, but the richest portfolios of sports teams owned. Just explain what this list is, even beyond that, and certainly add to that if I didn't get it right.
No, Kevin, you got it exactly right. What this list does, it takes those individuals or companies and we analyze and value the sports portfolio of all their teams and sports-related businesses. To qualify for the list, though, you have to be a controlling owner of at least one sports team worth $1 billion or more. So, for example, TKO Holdings, which is the publicly traded vehicle for which WWE and UFC, the mixed martial arts enterprise, trade on the stock exchange, is not eligible for the list, even though it has a valuation above $15 billion. That's because there's no sports team involved. So the reason why we looked at this and have done this at CNBC is because over the last few years, there's been a trend of people owning more than one sports team, as well as a lot of different types of sports assets that they can utilize with their sports team holdings. Those sports team properties could be things like a regional sports network, such as the case with the Yankee Global Enterprises and the Yes Network, or Ted Leonsis and his regional sports network. It could be something like Legends, which is the stadium hospitality and premium seating business that Jerry Jones owns a stake in and the New York Yankees own a stake in. And this trend is happening because when I talk to sports team owners and those involved with these empires, they say there's tremendous scale,
right?
Meaning
sure,
you can cross-market and sell sponsorships to different teams. We just saw, for example, the WNBA announce 3 new franchises over the next couple of years. Those are being taken in by teams that already own NBA teams and have operating rights to their arenas, so they can maximize the revenue streams there. And when you look at sales, minority interest sales of sports empires over the last several months, you could see the very high valuations. So, for example, Stephen Ross sold a minority stake in a bundle of assets that included the Dolphins, Hard Rock Cafe, and the F1 race that he has down there every year. You also had a minority stake sale in Monumental Sports and Entertainment that went for a very high valuation. And just the other day, Rogers, which owned about 37% of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, which owns the Maple Leafs, the Raptors, the building, Toronto FC, which is the MLS team, they just bought out BCE, which owned about 37% of Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment. So Rogers is going to have the ability to use their controlling ownership of that to put it on TV, to market, all of that stuff. And this is the way the sports world is really evolving right now.
Yeah, interesting. And you know, when you said about the cross marketing opportunities for each of, you know, the Empire's portfolio companies or portfolio teams, actually, although they're not all teams, some of them are, you know, associated businesses as you described. But I thought about, you know, the roll-up days. I'm sure you're very familiar with, you know, the rolling up of, you know, kind of fragmented businesses into one big company where not only did you get those marketing economies of scale, but you got a lot of that, you know, HR and accounting and a lot of these, you know, functions that are necessary within a company all centralized to gain huge economies of scale. So I would imagine that that's a big part of it as well, you know, in sort of the gains, the positives that emerge from owning multiple, you know, sports properties because they're similar businesses.
Yeah, no, Kevin, you're exactly right. You know, and when you think about it, right, you look at the people that have been increasingly investing in sports teams and sports properties, especially now that private equity has been getting involved the last few years. These guys know all about what you're talking about. They've been doing that by investing in all their other businesses over the years. So, you know, I could triple the value of my sports portfolio by, you know, adding multiple teams, by adding investments in, you know, like the Kraft family. You know, they have an analytics business, which is immensely popular and big. You know, there's AEG, which has AXS, a huge sports ticketing business. They can get that economies of scale that you're talking about because I'm tripling the size of my portfolio, but I'm not tripling the size of my accounting department or human resources department or, you know, marketing department.
Right. Yeah. Do you think, you know, you talked about Stephen Ross. Do you think that in the future we will see sales of empires, you know, multiple holdings of, you know, Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment or Fenway versus just one-off purchases of teams or individual, you know, entities within the empire or within the portfolio?
I think that's possible, but I think what we're going to see first over the next several years is the folks who own these empires selling small pieces of them, you know, 5%, 10%, things like that. So, you know, for instance, let's take a look at Mark Walter, right? So, you know, he came in several years ago and with his group and bought the Dodgers, right? And then after that, he brought in a lot of minority investors buying small pieces.
Right.
You know, that also gives you capital. He built up the brand. He got a winning team. Then he brings in minority investors who want to be part of that winning brand and winning team, especially in a market like LA. You know, now he's a minority investor in the LA Lakers, but he's got an agreement from Jeannie Buss to buy out her controlling stake in it. So he's going to be suddenly, you know, one of the bigger sports empires when this deal closes, because besides the Dodgers and the Lakers, he's an investor with Todd Bowley in Chelsea FC. He's an investor in women's ice hockey league. You know, he's got an F1 investment. So, you know, he's building up this empire gradually. And then he can go to minority investors say, hey, how would you like a piece of the tremendous scale and the economies of, you know, that I've built up, and you don't got to go in and buy a piece here, a piece here, and a piece here. Just buy a piece of my holding company and you're in.
Yeah, that makes sense. By the way, just on Mark Walter and the Lakers sale, how did that end up being a $10 billion valuation, Mike?
You know what? Nobody knows, but I will tell you this. He had a right of first refusal, and, you know, I don't know if the Jeannie Buss and her siblings said, we're going to go to market, you have first choice, and he said, what do I have to offer to get this team? And she threw out a number, and he said, okay. But remember, it is an impressive number, and, you know, you and I always like to talk valuations, right? So this comes out to like 18 or 19 times revenue, which is an insane multiple of revenue. But he's not buying the whole thing, right? He already owns 26, 27%, and she's going to maintain after the deal another 15 or 18%. So in terms of like his cash payment, it's not like he's laying out $10 billion, you know? And also, I have to tell you, you know, I got to be honest, right? When he bought the Dodgers, I was one of those, you know, I said, $2 billion for the Dodgers. I said, that's crazy. You know, I was one of those, you know, but looking back at it all these years later, they're obviously worth way more than that right now. And he also has a unique advantage, we have to say. So, you know, to your point, why say 10 billion? You know, why do that? Well, if he can do that and cut off competition, he has great access to capital. He has ties with Guggenheim, which he used to help him get the Dodgers, financing that. There was a lot of hedge fund money, insurance money. And now he's recently started a new financial vehicle called TWG Global, which has also raised a lot of capital that's being put into sports. So he's very good at, and I want to be clear, I'm not saying there's anything nefarious or wrong with this, but he's very good at raising other people's money and using that to get his interest in sports teams. It's very smart.
I have a couple of questions related to two of the groups on your list, and I'll just let everybody know. Kroenke's number one, the Jones family, Jerry Jones is number two, and then Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment. That's Josh Harris, the managing partner of a 20-plus limited partner group that owns our football team along with his partner, David Blitzer. They're third on the list. And Monumental Sports and Entertainment, Ted Leonsis, being the founder, owner, chairman, and managing partner, is 19th on this list. I've suggested recently, and I just want to know if you think I'm completely off my rocker. So Washington's in a contract negotiation with their star wide receiver, Terry McLaurin. And it will be the first major contract in terms of cash outlay that they've done since acquiring the team. You know, a lot of one-year deals last year. The biggest deal so far in free agency this year was, you know, basically $30 million guaranteed over 3 years. This is going to be a $60, $70, $80 million guaranteed deal. And I've suggested recently they paid $6 billion for the team less than 2 years ago, which they needed 20-plus limiteds to get done. They've put in approximately $100 million into the existing stadium just to bring it up to code so people don't, get, water dumped on them or have railings fall down. And they're about to, we think, end up being on the hook for $2.7 billion in what will be the new stadium on the RFK site in DC. Hopefully that gets done here shortly. And I suggested that the McLaurin conversation, and by the way, they're going to have to pay Jaden Daniels an all-time contract in 2 years. It'll be the largest contract ever done in the history of the league, more likely than not, if he stays healthy. That they could be, as it relates to this football team on a P&L basis, cash strapped. Is that nuts?
I would suspect that given that you do have the cap, that cash strap would be probably, I think not that severe. I don't think so, because I think that, look, they're going to be getting more money every year from the national TV deal.
Yep.
I think that's going to help them. I think one of the questions will be also is, you mentioned the new stadium. Like, they finally got the arena situation squared away with the Sixers, right? So they're just basically going to get a much better lease.
Right. So, he walked away from the downtown thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And to be fair, and Ted Leonsis went through the same thing. Sure. I mean, the politics, and I'm not taking sides of should it be all private money, or what if any should be the public contribution? All that aside, the politics down there for new stadiums is really tough, either way you look at it. So I think that one thing that's possible, and I'm saying this is my idea. I just want to make it clear that I don't speak to them. But you could also have a situation where you bring in new investors for the state football stadium. So, the A's in baseball, the Athletics have done that with their new stadium that's going to be built
right
in Las Vegas. So there are ways to sort of separate the various assets from a legal standpoint. So, for example, you could set up something called New Stadium Co. And that could be something where there are individuals perhaps that are not owners of the Washington Commanders football franchise
sure.
that are investors in the new stadium.
Right.
I just think I agree with you on one thing. I mean, if the main point is this isn't going to be easy, yeah, it isn't. And if you talk about guaranteed contracts, as you know, the amount that you're not paying out in the current year, the future years, you have to put in escrow.
Exactly.
So you got to put money there, which is going to make it tough. But the other thing is, he knew going in that he was going to need this new stadium. I mean, in the back of his mind, the calculus was, okay, I'm paying $6 billion for the football team. I'm going to have to pump money into the current stadium to make it viable, and also a lot of money, private money, into a new stadium down the road. So I think all that was part of the calculus. And like I said, when you're in this world of private equity, like these guys are, they know how to raise money. The NFL does also allow, even though they have a $800 million or $850 million debt limit on the team,
right?
They do allow sections for stadiums. So there's also ways to borrow money,
right,
and to be able to put that on the stadium too. So I don't know. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I think they'll come out of this fine. And most of all, and it hurts me to say this as a New York Giants fan for 60 years, he is doing. The Washington football franchise is a huge fan base, and territorially is one of the larger ones in the NFL. So he's got a great franchise, to build on, and a brand that is on the mend from that perspective. But no, I get your point. It's not going to be easy.
Yeah, I know you got to run, but I got two more for you real quickly. Number one is this. What's of the four major professional sports, which sport generates the highest margins?
Football, the NFL, the NBA, and the NHL are all about 20% or so on an EBITDA margin.
Yep.
Baseball's much lower, and the reason for that, obviously, is that, baseball has no cap. They have the luxury tax. Hockey has the hardest cap, the NHL. And then I would say following them is the NFL, then the NBA, and then baseball. The weird thing about baseball, though, is although I think their margin's about 15% or 12 or something like that, it's because of the no cap, it's really skewed. So you have teams like, the Mets lost $300 million or something.
Yeah.
But then you have some of the lowest revenue teams that, because of revenue sharing and the formula they use, and the fact that the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Red Sox got to write these big checks to Tampa and Kansas City and those teams actually will make money.
Yeah.
So it's kind of screwy.
Well, you probably just answered my last question, which is, we're going through, a rough stretch for our baseball team here, owned by the Lerners. And they had it for sale, a year ago. They wanted $2 billion plus. And you see the Lakers valued, and I understand that Mark Walter's not buying $10 billion worth of Lakers stock, But the Nats can't even sell. They can't even sell a baseball franchise for $2 billion, and we've seen it. Artie Moreno pulled the sale of the Angels, a year or two ago. And I guess you just answered the question. The no cap in baseball, does it depress valuations for teams?
I think it depends on the franchise.
True.
I think what happened with the Nationals, I think they asked too much. I mean, they were out there. The Lerners were told, and I was told this by people who knew the deal, that they could sell the team for at least $2.5 billion. So they came out asking way too much, especially at that time. The whole thing with Masson hadn't been settled.
Right.
So it was just too big a check to write for somebody to see. And there were interested people, but it was so frustrating at the time because the asking price was way too high. And then we saw the Orioles sell for like a little over $1.7 billion. So you can see that 2.6, was way, way, way too high. The Angels with Artie was different. They definitely had people that were going to pay a high price for that team. I think it was well over $2 billion. But he himself, what happened with Artie was he was trying to get that new ballpark and trying to work something out with the city. And, he wanted the city to throw in land, and he was going to build like one of these, mixed use areas and all that. And he really, it really soured his stomach on terms of ownership because of the way he was portrayed in the press out there over that. And so he had a moment where he was fed up and he said, I'm out of here. And then at the last minute, after there were some people who had come, visited the ballpark, even walked around the locker room and wanted to buy it. And then he was like, you know what, he really changed his mind. It wasn't a question with him that he couldn't sell it. He just had a change of heart.
Did Snyder?
That I know.
Did Snyder get a good deal?
I think he did.
Yeah.
I think he did.
In the moment.
The circumstances. Yeah. No, absolutely. I absolutely think he did.
Thanks for doing this, as always. Hope you're well. At Mike Ozanian, Ozanian on X on Twitter. Appreciate it. And the story is a good read if you're interested in this stuff. CNBC's most valuable sports empires in 2025. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Kevin. Always enjoy it, pal.
Mike Ozanian, everybody. Up next, Mike Rizzo has written his goodbye to the Nats fan base, and he's added a gift to go with it. More on that when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com.
All right, here's what's trending on this Friday, July 11th. Happy 7-Eleven to all. Like I said in the previous, it is free Slurpee Day. Make sure you get your free Slurpees today at 7-Eleven. Wimbledon action going on right now. Men's semifinal just wrapped up. Spain's number 2 overall, Carlos Alcaraz, defeats the American Taylor Fritz in 3 sets, or by a score of 3-1. He will face the winner coming up against Jannik Sinner, who is taking on the legendary Serb Novak Djokovic. And the home run derby participants have been finalized. Ronald Acuna Jr., Byron Buxton, Junior Caminero, O'Neal Cruz, Kyle Raleigh, Brent Rooker, James Wood, and Jazz Chisholm rounds out the field last night. The home run derby will take place on Monday. The Mystics, they got the win last night over the Las Vegas Aces after erasing a 15-point deficit and battling down the stretch. The Mystics win 70-68, and the Wizards Summer League debut tonight at 9 p.m. They will take on the Phoenix Suns. The Nats, they wrap up their series in St. Louis. They fall to the Cardinals by a score of 8-1. A rough outing for Michael Soroka as he threw 91 pitches through just 4 innings. And the Nats kick off their series tonight against the Brewers. First pitch is at 8:10. Nats on deck with Charlie and Dave at 7:40. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1 and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the streams and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
So, put a note out to Nats fans titled "A Heartfelt Thank You." He also included a gift in this note. He wrote, "It's been an incredible ride. The wins, the losses, the championships, the celebrations, and everything in between. It has been an honor to be the president and general manager of your Washington Nationals. From the bottom of my heart, I want to thank each and every fan who has supported my goal to lead this franchise to greatness with integrity, honesty, and professionalism. In the process, it is my hope we've created memories for you and your family to cherish for a lifetime. DC has become our home in every sense of the word, and I could not imagine a better place to have done it all together than right here in the nation's capital. We will remain committed to the district through the Rizzo Family Foundation and continue to support children and families in our community who need it the most. As a way to say thank you to the fans for 19 amazing years with the Nationals, grab a round on Riz Monday, July 14th before the Home Run Derby at Penn Quarter Sports Tavern or Walter's Sports Bar. First round of beer is on us from 5 to 7. Cheers to an incredible ride. That's from the Riz Kids Family Foundation and from Mike Rizzo. He's picking up your first beer this coming Monday night before the Home Run Derby at Penn Quarter Sports Tavern and Walter's Sports Bar. Walter's Sports Bar is down in Navy Yard, and Penn Quarter Sports Tavern's right there in Penn Quarter. That's very nice. Very nice. Look, I personally think Mike Rizzo did a good enough job, and with that trade of Juan Soto producing what it's produced, including 2 All-Stars and should have been a third, and with the draft upcoming, I would have preferred Mike Rizzo stay on as general manager. I'm sure that there are reasons for not wanting him, and I respect those of you who have those reasons, like the draft failures from essentially 2012 through 2021 in particular. I really like Mike, and I think one of the things he said in that note, when he said, in the process, it's my hope we've created memories for you and your family to cherish for a lifetime. I think that's true. This is a city that had no memories, no tradition, no pain that we suffered through, no exhilaration that we had suffered through, like every other baseball town. And going back to 2012 and blowing that, big lead in Game 5, God, that was painful, but it was set the groundwork of building, memories, bad and good. Same thing, losing that National League Division Series in 2016 to the Dodgers in a Game 5 at home. And then the next year, obviously, against the Cubs, losing Game 5 again. There were a lot of pains along the way, not to mention, the 18-inning, Game 2 against the Giants in that 3-1 series loss in 2014 before just an incredible run of memories in the 2019 postseason, rallying from 3-1 down to beat the Brewers in the wild card. Howie Kendrick's grand slam in Game 5 against the Dodgers at Dodger Stadium to get them to the NLCS, sweeping the Cardinals, and then, the World Series, winning the first 2 and then losing the next 3 at home, only to have Steven Strasburg pitch one of the epic all-time clutch performances in DC sports history, what he did in Game 6 to even up that series and force a 7th and deciding game, which the Nats, of course, won with incredible memories in that game as well. There's an 8-year run, man, that matches almost anything any of the other pro sports teams, major pro sports teams in our city have done. 8 years, playoffs 5 times, and a world championship. Only the Gibbs run tops that from 82 through 91. That's it. Anyway, wish Mike and his family the best. And again, he's picking up a beer Monday night. Class act at Penn Quarter Sports Tavern and Walters Sports Bar. All right, when we come back, who on our football team heading into 2025 has the most to prove? It can be a player, it can be a coach, it can be somebody in the front office. Who's got the most to prove heading into 2025? I'm going to give you my answer and my runner-up when we come back. 301-230-0980. Phone lines are open for this. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show. Who's got the most to prove in 2025 on our football team? Can be a player. It can be a coach. It could be somebody in the front office. It could be ownership. It could be anybody associated with the organization. This is primarily for me a player thing, although I do have a coach that I have considered for my number one spot, the number one player on the team with something to prove. 301 230-0980. Who's your number one? And then I also want a runner-up. I'm going to give you my number one, and I'm going to give you my runner-up. I also have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 others receiving votes. And I will save those unless just to let people call in, because I don't want to steal anybody's thunder. Max has them as well, but 301-230-0980. Who's got the most to prove in 2025 in this organization, this team, this coaching staff? For me, number one's easy. I actually had sort of a debate with myself about number two, because I think there are a lot of possibilities. But number one is easy for me. The player in the organization on the team that has the most to prove in 2025 is the player they acquired at the trade deadline, Marshawn Lattimore. He's my number one. Marshawn Lattimore has not been healthy and played a full season since 2021, his last Pro Bowl season. He was, in the moment in 21, and even for parts of 22 and 23, considered a top five-ish cover corner in the NFL. But last year, he played just 9 out of the 17 games. In 2023, he missed 7 games. In 2022, he missed 10 games. His biggest issue has been availability. He has to prove that he can be available to this team for the significant majority of the games. And then he's got to prove that he can play much better than the way he played after they acquired him, when he was getting torched on the regular by the likes of A.J. Brown and others. So Marshawn Lattimore, for me, is number one on the list of players and or coaches or anybody else in the organization that has something to prove. They didn't acquire Marshawn Lattimore to be, a solid starting corner that they could rely on as an outside guy. They acquired him when they acquired him for what they acquired him for, to be a significant part of the end of season run, which they thought when they acquired him could include winning playoff games, plural, and maybe even getting to a Super Bowl. And you know what? They did, but without his help for the most part. I'm not saying that every game he played in was a bad game last year. He wasn't terrible in the game in the game against Tampa, right? That was the game that he was pretty decent in. Detroit, not terrible. Actually, Tampa, Mike Evans was the problem. Detroit was the game he actually played okay in. Mike Evans and A.J. Brown were a problem for him. And then he lost his cool in the NFC Championship game. He's got something to prove. That's why I would have not, completely bailed on the voluntary activities. I know that wasn't his thing in New Orleans, but don't really care. He's got something to prove here. He had proven something in New Orleans. He made 4 Pro Bowls in his first 5 seasons. He hasn't made one since, and he's barely been available at times. Marshawn Lattimore, number one on my list of players, coaches, or people in the organization that have something to prove, have the most to prove in 2025. I'll give you my runner-up in a second, but Max, who is your number one? Who's the winner on the list of players, coaches, or people in the organization that have the most to prove?
For me, coming into this year, I mean, we talked about the defensive line quite a bit, and especially towards the end of last season, with us letting John Allen go. I think there's a lot of pressure that's going to be on Daron Payne this year, because, like I said, he's kind of the only guy. Him and Johnny Newton, it's going to be down to them. I mean, we brought in Javon Kinlaw, Eddie Goldman, and guys like that. Sheldon Day is back, but Daron's got to be the guy kind of who's leading the charge on the defensive line this year. And there's been a lot of talk. Like Dan Quinn said, he had a great offseason. I've seen him popping up on all these lists, like guys to watch based on, coaching and all that, their comments. But yeah, so Daron's kind of the one guy who I think it's going to be or it's going to be facing a lot of pressure this year. We've been talking about it all offseason. I feel like you would go to him before the season and be like, hey, act like it's a contract year, man, because we are evaluating every single option that we have with you. So I think Daron's kind of the guy who's going to be under a lot of pressure to perform at the beginning and throughout this season.
So I mentioned that for me, my number one is a runaway number one, Marshawn Lattimore. But my number two, my runner-up, that there were several in consideration. And Duran was one of those players. But he's not the one I chose for my runner-up. My runner-up is another player that is going to be Marshawn Lattimore, relatively new. This player, brand new. I think Deebo Samuel's the runner-up to Marshawn Lattimore on the most to prove in 2025 list. And I think for a lot of the same reasons that Lattimore has the most to prove. He has had an issue with being not necessarily available. He's been different. With Deebo, he is tough as nails, and his injuries have been different than Lattimore's. Hamstrings are difficult, but you don't get 100% of Deebo Samuel every Sunday or Monday night of every season. He missed 2 games last year, but was on the injury report for 6. Same with the year before. The year before that, he missed 5 games. So availability is huge for him. And look, he hasn't made the Pro Bowl since 2021. That was his last truly standout year. 1,405 pass receiving yards, 18.2 yards per reception, 6 touchdown catches, 8 rushing touchdowns, and 365 yards. First team All Pro. He hasn't sniffed anything like that since 2021. So similar to Lattimore, he's got something to prove. Now, he did have a good season in 2023. He had, 12 total touchdowns, 225 yards rushing, 892 passing on 60 catches. But last year wasn't a great year, and it wasn't a great year for the team either. I think Deebo has a lot to prove. He is my runner-up on the most to prove list following my number one runaway, Marshawn Lattimore. Who's your runner-up to Daron Payne?
So my runner-up to Daron Payne, I'm kind of going with guys that we've talked about a lot and position groups that we've talked about a lot over the offseason, and this position is not going to be a big surprise to anybody. It's going to be the running back room, and I'm going to go with Brian Robinson Jr. With the drafting of Bill Merritt, I think that I understand it's a 7th-round pick, and a lot of times those running backs don't really become anything, but at the same time, Brian Robinson had a pretty much a down year last year. Getting upfield and having that breakaway speed was a big thing. The physicality, he was running a little bit scared kind of towards the end of the season, and I know coaching staff had a good conversation with him about that. So this is going to be like a nut up or shut up year for B-Rob, and because there are going to be a lot of guys that are going to be fresh coming up in the draft next year. So I feel like that position is definitely going to be it's going to be of need coming into the offseason no matter what. But at the same time, if Brian Robinson can have, one hell of a season, hopefully he can kind of keep himself in the rotation here or find himself a big deal somewhere else.
He's clearly on the list for me in others receiving votes. So you hit on 2 that I've gotten others receiving votes. We have 2 different answers here with our most to prove and our runner-up on most to prove. What do you guys think? I have 3 or 4 other names that I will, hand pick here if they don't come in with phone calls. But phone lines are now open. 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. Who on our football roster, coaching room, organization, who's got the most to prove in 2025? I want your answer right now at 301-230-0980. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980 and the team980.com. All right, who's got the most to prove entering the 2025 season? 301-230-0980. Marshawn Lattimore was my number one, and it's not even close with Lattimore. Lattimore hasn't really been the player that he was early in his career for a couple of years now. He has struggled to stay on the field. That's really the number one thing he has to prove, is that he can stay healthy enough to provide them with 16 to 17 games worth of cornerback play, worth of outside cornerback play. And then he's got to play well. He's got to play, like he did at the height of his career, because he is not done. There's nothing about him at 29 years old, just turned 29, that would say his best days are behind him. I'm trying to think. We had somebody on the show recently, and I can't remember who it was, who essentially said what you can hope for now with Lattimore is just a productive player on the outside. And I said, well, that's not what they traded for. They traded for a Pro Bowl corner, and they're hoping to get that. He's got a lot to prove. Debo was number 2 for me, but I've got several people in the running, and did have in the running for number 2, several players and a coach specifically who I thought long and hard about as the potential runner-up to Marshawn Lattimore on the who's got the most to prove list. Max went with Daron Payne, number 1, and Brian Robinson Jr., number 2. I had both Payne and Robinson Jr. on my others receiving votes list, but I also have a coach and a player who I haven't mentioned, another player on the others receiving votes list as well. If you guys don't mention either, I will mention it after we get through calls. But phone lines are lighting up for this. Who's got the most to prove entering 2025? Let's start with our guy Dominic in Tampa. Dominic, go ahead. Dominic, you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you now, Dominic.
Okay, good. Yeah, no, for me, so I'm gonna go with a coach. And for me, I'm gonna go Joe Witt Jr.
Yeah.
And here's why. Because you're talking about a guy that, when he came from Dallas, he was, correct me if I'm wrong, but he was nothing more than a secondary coach. And this is last year was his first real defensive coordinator job. And for me, I don't think it was anything to really write home about. I mean, you're talking about one of the worst rushing defenses in the league. And, now you got all of these guys. You got a Louvu, a Wagner, a Lattimore. You got to do what your job and put these guys in the best position possible. So I think, for me, it's for him. I think he's playing for his job too, in my opinion. I think if it's another underwhelming season on him, I think Dan Quinn's going to look somewhere else to go in that direction. If doesn't get it together. And then my second, player,
your runner-up, yeah,
for me, yeah, it's going to be Brandon Coleman. And the reason why I say that is because you were in essence replaced not by one player, but by 2 players in your position, and you got moved to guard. And if you don't perform, as a guard, well, now where are you going? Now you're stuck. You can't go back to a tackle position because you're already replaced by 2 players. So for me, those are my 2.
Okay.
And I think, I hope those 2, do what they need to.
Yeah, look, Joe Witt Jr. was right there for me. I was considering him as my runner-up to Lattimore. He's got a lot to prove this upcoming season, a lot. They finished 23rd overall in DVOA defensively, 26th against the run. They just weren't good enough against teams that didn't have a lot. We've been through this, so many times, but the quarterbacks they faced last year, my God, I mean, that's not what they're likely going to face this year unless there are a slew of injuries. But, facing the Giant situation, getting a chance to face Deshaun Watson, who looked like he had checked out completely, Andy Dalton, a young Caleb Williams, obviously you didn't even play Jalen Hurts for a full game in game 2. No Dak Prescott last year, backups, including not only Cooper Rush, but in the season finale, they essentially got Trey Lance's trial run. The situation when they faced the Saints, Spencer Rattler and Jake Hayner, Will Levis. I mean, it was terrible quarterbacks, terrible passing teams. Now they face great running backs. There's no doubt about that. They face, one of the unbelievable, opponent running back lists of all time. But Joe Witt Jr.'s got a lot to prove. And to your point, part of it is that he's never been a coordinator before. He was the secondary coach with Quinn in Dallas. And this was his first shot at being a defensive coordinator. Let's see what happens in year 2. But they didn't turn people over. That was the other thing. They needed to, that's what they thrived on in Dallas was takeaways, and they didn't get a lot of those. We'll see what happens this year, but he's definitely in the spotlight. He's got to perform. The defense has to perform, or if the defense ends up costing them a deep run in the postseason, or even a postseason appearance, because they go 9-8 or 10-7 and miss, or 8-9, because they just couldn't get off the field defensively. Yeah, the number one item in the offseason will be, who are they going to go out and hire to be the new defensive coordinator? Remember, the head coach oversees this as a defensive head coach. Who's got the most to prove in 2025? Let's go to Day in D.C. Day, go ahead.
Hey, what's up, Kev? It's Bay.
What's up, Bay? How are you?
I'm the same with Dominic, man. Joe Witt. Last year I gave you a pass. This year I can't give you a pass. We invested the most money on that defense. We trade out capital. We're paying players. You're gonna have to respond with something real drastic this year, Joe Witt. And my runner-up is Larry Tunsil. I want to know why he's constantly getting traded from every team. I want to know why he's constantly having all these penalties. And I want to see something better than just the name. Those are my two. Okay.
That's interesting on Tunsil. They're going to have to pay him here, and you're going to pay him because you traded a boatload for him. And he is still an outstanding at 30 years old. He's one of the best pass blocking left tackles. But I have less concern about why he's been traded twice, although, there is a bit of a reddish flag around them trading a guy who was clearly their best offensive line on an offensive line that wasn't very good last year. He made the Pro Bowl again last year. Some of that's on reputation. He led the league in penalties for offensive linemen, a lot of false starts. I didn't even consider him. That's actually reasonable. Roland in Annapolis, go ahead. Who's got the most to prove? And then if you've got a runner-up, go ahead and give it to me.
Hey, Kevin. Yeah, I was actually going to say Tunsil. I talked to Max before. He said same two players. I said Robinson and Payne for sure. But also two other acquisitions. What about Kinlaw? Kind of the same thing with Tunsil. He's been traded a couple times. We got to see what he got, because if he ain't got nothing, he's going to be out the league.
And he got paid.
And he got paid, exactly, like big contract. Also, Will Harris. We got to see, like, if that is he actually going to, like, contribute to the secondary or what? I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of players got stuff to prove, but, yeah, mainly who we brung in. I mean, I can't put it all on Joe Witt. The players got to perform. I would like to see Joe Witt succeed and go forward, but we got to see what we can do with the pieces that we have. What we got coming in, we're paying them, so they better produce.
We got a lot of answers coming in here. Thanks for the call. I appreciate it. I wanted to just go back to Brandon Coleman. Last caller, I think, mentioned Brandon Coleman. Brandon Coleman played pretty well last year as a rookie third rounder. Got a lot of snaps, played pretty well. He's versatile. I personally don't. Everybody's got something to prove, but who's got the most to prove is the question here. I wouldn't really consider Brandon Coleman among the players that have been mentioned, or Joe Witt Jr., who's been mentioned as well. And as far as Kinlaw goes, and Will Harris, look, they're coming in here. I guess Kinlaw, because of the contract. I mean, the contract was a bigger contract than expected, but it's not like he gets paid in the higher echelons of defensive tackles. He doesn't. I think he's like 15th in average annual, something like that. It might even be lower than that. And Will Harris signed a very, short-term, low-dollar deal. I guess from our standpoint, he's got to prove, or the organization has to prove, that they were right about Will Harris being every bit of what Chin was last year. But I wouldn't have those players necessarily at the top of who's got the most to prove list. But I like the diversity here in the answers. We're getting a lot of different names. And the Tunsil thing is interesting to me. Ian, go ahead.
Kevin, I think a lot of the answers have been said. Mine was Debo, Lattimore, and Joe Witt Jr. I think that, and then I dropped off on the first segment. The sport I don't watch as much is regular season college basketball. It has become a 1-month sport. So thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Ian. I mean, I had as my kind of first player on the others receiving votes, I had Deron Payne, followed by Joe Witt Jr., and then Brian Robinson Jr. There's one more player I haven't mentioned that, I think has a lot to prove in the upcoming season. If nobody gives it to me, I'll give it to you. But let's stick with phone lines, 301-230-0980. Who's got the most to prove? It can be a player, it can be a coach, it could be somebody else in the organization if you want it to be. Keith in Clinton. Keith, go ahead.
Hey, buddy, how you doing?
Good.
I have I'm going to do my runner-up first. My run-up is a three-way tie, and that's Marshawn Lattimore, Brian Robinson, and Deebo Samuel. Those are my runner-ups. I'm sorry. It's a three-way tie. Okay. And number one, the award goes to Joe Witt, because he hasn't done anything against any top-quality quarterbacks. It had to be the offense to always come back down and score. In fact, he didn't really do much against the backup quarterback, young quarterbacks, or rookie quarterbacks. And so I'm like, we're going to get some serious quarterbacks this year. And I haven't seen, it's like he didn't do any kind of studying to say, let me take away this strength from the quarterback. Now, they're going to study our quarterback. Everybody knows he rolls to his right. When he's ready to run out, he's going to run to his right. So we're going to have a harder time this year because people are studying our quarterback from last year. Well, he's like Joe Witt didn't do any studying. So Joe Witt is my number one in a three-way tie with Lattimore, Robinson, and Samuel.
Thanks for the call, Keith. Appreciate it. Look, on Joe Witt Jr., it's kind of like the running game last year, other than Jaden. Was it more the offensive line, or was it more the running backs, or maybe even the quarterback or play calling? On defense, was the inability to stop the run more about the personnel, or was it more about the scheme and the play calling? We're going to find out. Again this year, you have to have been internally a bit alarmed about what happened, especially against some of the really good backs they faced. And to everybody's point, they just didn't face any offensive juggernauts last year, with the exception of Philadelphia. And even Philadelphia was much more of a defensive team than anything else. And, there were games like the Philadelphia game at home. If you recall, after Hurts left the game, they actually ended up having one of their better days defensively against the run. It was Barkley ripped off a couple of runs early with Hurts in the game. And then after that, the defense really ended up keeping them in the game. Because remember, one of the reasons they won that game one of the reasons they were in trouble was 5 turnovers. One of the reasons they got opportunities to score and come back in the game is they actually got stops in that game. They didn't get stops in a lot of games, but they forced punts and forced field goals in that game. And those were huge. But, they were also facing Kenny Pickett, not Jalen Hurts, for 3.5 quarters. Let's go to JYD in DC. JYD, go ahead.
Hey, what's up, Kevin?
What's up?
The number one guy is Lattimore. The second guy is Payne.
Okay.
And then Kinlaw.
All right.
Those are three. I give the coaches a pass simply because of their record. You know, when you go to the NFC Championship game, I give them a pass. But because you know, if their record was bad, then I would talk about the coaches. But I ain't gonna talk about the coaches.
Yeah, but their defense wasn't good. So I totally understand that Joe Witt Jr. is on the spot here.
But then people talking about scheming up this and scheming that. Before you start talking about scheming up and all this and that, you can't even play basic defenses. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, okay. Well, again, some of that falls back on the scheme and the coaching. Here's the thing. I can't tell you definitively that they were not a well-coached defensive team, because the truth of the matter is they weren't loaded defensively. But at the same time, it's not like they were completely void of talent. They did have Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner both make second team All-Pro.
Why can't you play? Let's take Payne. Why are you getting blown out of your hole? Your job is to plug the holes and let the linebackers clean it up.
Yeah, Duran didn't have a great year. Duran was the focus a lot of the time of the offensive coordinator of the other team, not like a true superstar would be. But Duran faced more doubles last year than anybody else on that defensive line, including John Allen. I'm going to be interested to see what the loss of John Allen means to the team. Thanks, JYD. Appreciate it. Everybody on hold, stay there. 301-230-0980. We do have an open line if you want to jump in, but everybody there, I see you. We'll get to your who has the most to prove answers when we return. I do want to mention that Window Nation has a great sale going on right now. If you're interested in new windows, now is the time to consider them. 50% off on all window styles and no interest until the year 2030. 0% interest for 5 full years. So you can finance the purchase and not have to worry about interest until the year 2030, all the while paying half price on the windows because you're getting a 50% discount. It's been hot. It's going to stay hot and humid. If your air conditioning has been running on full blast, it's probably because your windows are older and they're inefficient. They're not insulated enough. This is why you should at least call Window Nation at 866-90-NATION or go to windownation.com. Mention my name and have them come out and just give you a free in-home estimate. It'll take an hour or less. And then when they install the windows, it'll take a day or less. I promise you're going to be working with a great company that's customer service driven. You're going to be working with a company that's got a terrific product, and I'm not sure you're going to get a better deal. 866-90-NATION, windownation.com. Mention my name for your free in-home estimate.
All right, here's what's happening on this 7-Eleven. It is free Slurpee Day and Wimbledon action going on right now. Men's semifinal. Carlos Alcaraz defeated Taylor Fritz this morning, and he will face the winner of Jannik Sinner taking on the legendary Serbian Novak Djokovic. Currently, Sinner leads Djokovic 1-0, currently up 2-0 into the second set. And the Home Run Derby participants have been finalized. Ronnie Acuna Jr., Byron Buxton, Junior Caminero, O'Neal Cruz, Cal Raleigh, Brett Rooker, James Wood, and last night, rounding out the field, it was announced Jazz Chisholm will be participating in this year's Home Run Derby. That will be on Monday. And the Mystics, they got their win last night over the Las Vegas Aces after erasing a 15-point deficit and fighting it out down the stretch. The Mystics win 70-68. The Wizards, their Summer League debuts tonight at 9 p.m. They will take on the Phoenix Suns, and the Nats, they wrap up their series in St. Louis. They fall to the Cardinals by a score of 8-1. A rough outing for Michael Soroka as he threw 91 pitches in just 4 innings. The Nats kick off their series against the Brewers tonight. First pitch is at 8:10. Nats on deck with Charlie and Dave will be at 7:40 on the Fan. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, Type in the Team 980, you hit subscribe, and Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the streams and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC Sports, and that is what's trending.
Wizards open up Summer League play tonight. Get to see Trey Johnson. 9 o'clock tip, ESPN. I'll be watching, actually. Why not? Why not? Check out all the young players. They traded for Marvin Bagley yesterday. Do you know what that trade ended up actually? They sent Marvin Bagley, Johnny Davis, and a pick to Memphis earlier in the season. And all of that brought back Will Riley, multiple second-round picks, Marcus Smart, Dylan Jones, and then they just re-signed Bagley again to play for them. Will Dawkins knows what he's doing. It's not going to matter if these players, 2 to 3 of them, don't end up being star players. But he certainly knows what he's doing with respect to how to execute a trade in the best interest of not only the organization, but the plan that the organization is employing. All right, back to the question. Who's got the most to prove in 2025? For me, it's Marshawn Lattimore. I don't even think it's close, personally. What they traded for him, what their expectations were for him, he hasn't played a healthy season since 2021, hasn't been thought of as a Pro Bowl kind of corner since 2021. Look, people understand his talent, and that's what they were trading for. He's got to deliver on that. You know, they gave up a lot for him. They gave up a lot for Tunsil. Tunsil's been playing, though. Lattimore hasn't. And when he did play last year, it wasn't good. My runner-up for the most to prove is Debo for a lot of the same reasons. By the way, Debo himself has a lot to prove because he's on a contract year. You know, this is a contract season for him. I actually feel better about Debo delivering this year than I do about Marshawn Lattimore. And then, you know, so far on my also receiving votes, Joe Witt Jr., Daron Payne, Brian Robinson Jr. Max had Payne 1 as the most approved, followed by Robinson Jr. Who do you have as your number one most approved, followed by a runner-up? I want to hear it. Let's go to our guy, Paulie. Paulie, go ahead.
L to the W, man. What's going on, big guy? How you doing?
You? What's up?
Hey, make sure you go out there and get that Slurpee today, man. Hey,
why is it Slurpee Day?
It is Slurpee Day.
Your producer only been saying it all.
Well, when he does the updates, sometimes I'm out working on something else. I didn't know that, but I used to. I can't tell you the last time I had a Slurpee. I cannot
You're
tell
missing
you.
out, pal.
It's been a while. But why not? Sounds good on a hot day. All right, what do you got?
Yeah, it's free, man. Free 99. I got Jaden Daniels, homie.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew somebody was going to say that. So go ahead. Give me your logic behind Jaden Daniels off the greatest rookie season in the history of the league, having something to prove.
That's it, right there.
Having the most to prove.
Was you here for 2013?
I was. Yeah. I was here for it.
2012, we had a rookie of the year at quarterback, led us to the division, led us to the playoffs, led us to everywhere we wanted to go. You know, what we could thought would happen with a rookie quarterback. And the next year, it all went to, you know what?
Well, it went to hell in a handbucket at the end of that year.
I know there are two different quarterbacks, two different players, but he still, listen, man, the NFL changed their whole TV schedule around the Washington Commanders and Jaden Daniels. He has to live up to that billing. They made him a primetime player coming into year 2.
But you think he's got the most to prove of anybody on the team?
Right, because he's the most important player on our team. So, yeah, I think he has the most
But still,
to prove.
Those are two different things. Yes, he's the most important player on the team, but that's not the question.
He's coming into his second year. We don't know, like just like that guy left him off that list, off that quarterback list. I had no problem with that because he's right. You know, things happen and, fluky things happen all last year. And you live right, you eat right, you live right, good things happen. I know all that. But I'm just saying, man, the pressure is on Jaden Daniels to deliver again in year 2. That's just my opinion. Now, what amazes me about y'all is this whole Joe Witt Jr. thing, man. Like, are you serious? Like, come on. Do you see the talent that
Dead
was on
serious.
The defense last year? I mean,
did I see what?
Had no cornerbacks. No cornerbacks.
Sanders still was a good corner.
You had, Samson was a rookie, and he was getting torched the first 3-4 weeks of the season until he made his mind up after in that Cincinnati game when Jamal Chase torched him. All of a sudden, a light clicked for him, like, F this, whatever.
Breaking news, rookie got off to a slow start. Thanks, Paulie.
Rookie getting off to a slow start.
Right. Hold on, listen. Hold on. No defensive ends. Not one. I mean, we got a bunch of tackles playing defensive ends.
We had one that had 10.5 sacks.
Okay, he had 10.5 sacks, and he was a liability. But they managed to scheme past that. Like, y'all talking about
we had two Paulie, we had two all-pros on defense. We had Wagner and Luvu. They both made all-pro.
Wagner made all-pro off of his name, bro.
Wagner had a good season last year.
He was part of the problem about starting to run.
Okay.
Sideline to sideline.
All right.
He couldn't run sideline to sideline. I'm telling you, man. Look, Joe Witt did a good job with adjustments. Like a lot of teams, they ran the ball on us. Look what they did in the second half. We did a good job of stopping things in the second half because we made adjustments. Like Joe Witt Jr. did a good job last year on bad.
We didn't make good adjustments against Dallas in either game. All right, I'll start with that one. We didn't make any adjustments against Pittsburgh.
A talent thing.
I'm sorry?
Thing. You keep saying that's a talent thing. Dallas have better talent than us.
Why are you screaming and making me scream? I said that that part of this certainly could have been personnel, but I think part of it could be him too. It's not insane to mention Joe Witt as part of this answer. It's not.
Listen, man, it is, man. Joe Witt did a hell of a job last year.
Really, 26th ranked defense, rush defense in the NFL.
Hey, that's the play. Hey, look at the players we have, man. I don't care about stats. I watched the game. It was a reason.
I watch the games too, as you know, because we talk about them. And one of the things I said consistently is there's a bit of a disconnect here because the players aren't terrible. All right, they don't have the worst personnel. I disagree with you on that. Frankie Louvu was outstanding. Wagner was solid. They had 10.5 sacks from a pass rusher. Dorrance Armstrong played very well at the end of the year. Quan Martin really came on. Lattimore, Sanders still really came on. So you're out of your mind if you say it was all personnel. I'm not saying it was only coaching. I'm saying that I don't really know how much of it was coaching versus personnel. You're saying you wouldn't even consider it. That's crazy. You're the one that's nuts.
How many times did the offense make a play against our defense and we was yelling, well, why did we run that? Why did we run that blitz? Or why didn't we do it? That was far few in between. It's the players, man. You're talking about the Dallas, they lived off to make a turnover. We didn't make turnover.
You started off with you started off with an unreasonable take. Part of what you're saying is true. It's hard to really determine how much of it was personnel versus scheme and play calling. But to suggest that everybody's nuts for saying that Joe Witt is under the spotlight and has something to prove you're off your rocker on that one.
I'm not off my rocker.
Yeah, you are.
Off your rocker. You want to blame somebody for something. And Joe Witt did a hell of a job in his first year.
How many times do I have to say I'm not sure how much of it was Joe Witt and how much of it was players? But that doesn't mean that from a fan standpoint, he doesn't have the most to prove next year. You disagree.
The first caller just said, and you agreed with him, if things don't go right on defense, they're going to be looking for a defensive coordinator next year.
Yeah, no doubt.
That's crazy.
No doubt. And by the way, you'll be apologizing if they're 26th in defense again next year. Let me move on. Let's go. Let me move on from you. G from the shop. Go.
Yeah, man. I'm not doing all that yelling with y'all, man. I do agree with Paulie to a certain extent about JD5, so we ain't got to hear people like Bert talking about we crowned him too early. He do need to get out that one and done year that RG3 had. He need to get out of there. But my opinion is the offensive line, especially Tunsil. When you can latch on to a top-tier talent like this, you can ride that wave all the way to the Hall of Fame, you know what I'm saying? So keep JD5 clean. Also, JD5 make an offensive line look better than it really is. So really make them clean offensive line. But I also agree with Paulie on the Joe Witt for the simple fact, Dan Quinn, defensive-minded coach, Joe Witt was there. He brought him along. If he was incompetent, they wouldn't have brought him along. You just said with Paulie, certain players was coming along throughout the season as the season progressed. And if you really, we talk about it all the time, how the NFC East get a different champion, how it's different teams every year in the playoffs that wasn't there the year before. If y'all really look, defenses change year to year. There's a
No
different
doubt.
top 5 every year.
No
so
doubt.
With a defensive-minded head coach and Joe Witt in his second year and get to cure up that personnel a little bit more, they know the deficiencies that was happening last year. And with our offense, if we fix them deficiencies on defense, we'll be in the Super Bowl.
Look, I love you, and I appreciate the call. And by the way, the Jaden thing is interesting. I just wouldn't put him at the top of the most to prove list, but understood that given our history as fans of this team going back to 2012 and then 2013, even though the situations were very different, I can understand why people would say, anybody's got to kind of prove it again after that outlier season. But with respect to Joe Witt Jr., let's keep it really simple. The question is, who's got the most to prove? Joe Witt Jr. may not have been the problem last year. It may have been personnel, but nobody knows that for sure. Okay, because they didn't go out and sign a lot of star players to bring in. The investment in defense was minimal compared to what we thought it might be heading into the offseason. Doesn't mean they didn't try, because I do think they were interested in Trey Hendrickson. I do. And I think they would have been interested in Myles Garrett, which speaks to they didn't have a star on defense, although I think Luvu's coming. But to suggest that it's nuts or crazy that part of the defensive woes last year could be coaching, well, of course it's a possibility. And if they have a second consecutive year of bad defense with a guy who was a first-time coordinator last year and is definitely getting a second shot, nobody made any bones about bringing Joe Witt Jr. back. So they obviously still have confidence in him. But if it's 2 straight years of poor results defensively, yeah, and that's why he is in the spotlight. That's why he's got something to prove. But also, G, what you said, and I've said it many, many times, defense has much more variance year to year than offense. Those of you that I didn't get to, by the way, Ethan, I saw your answer, and that was my other on my others receiving votes. Johnny Newton, I think a second-round pick that high up in the second round, they talked about him as a first-round talent. They talked about him when he was on the board. They were ecstatic. They were so lucky that he dropped to him. I know he had some injuries heading into last year, but I think Johnny Newton, I don't think third-rounders have something to prove from last year, or certainly not at the top of the list, but I think Johnny Newton's on that list. Anybody I didn't get to, I apologize. I am back on Monday. Enjoy the weekend. Chris is next.